Hi, I'm Trey Player, and today we're going to be talking about drones. I've been building and flying drones for the past 6 years. I've got about 28 years in the model industry, and today we're going to be focusing on multi-rotors, UAVs, fixed wings, and all the other different types of drones that are available. Now, what I'd like to do is go into a brief history of drones. Today, drones are the thing to talk about. Everybody's using them, and everywhere we go, we see them on the media, we see them on the news, and everybody's using them. But what we don't realize is that drones have been used since 1920. That's right, the military actually started using drones in World War I as target practice, and since then, drones have developed throughout the years. So from 1920 until present day, the military has been using them for target practice, and now we're starting to break into the surveillance scene. There's a large difference between military drones, commercialized drones, and private drones. As we just talked about, military drones are used for military applications such as surveillance, target practice, and other things along those lines. Commercial drones are used for aerial photography, filming through Discovery Channel, History Channel, and other shows like that. A lot of people will see drone shots and don't even realize that they're drone shots. They're just amazed that we were able to capture such beautiful footage. Hobbyist drones, on the other hand, are completely different. Hobby drones are something that anybody can pick up from the hobby store for anywhere from $20 to a couple of $100s. These are great starting points and able to get any of the average enthusiast involved in drones. This is something that I would highly recommend starting off on a low end as opposed to jumping right in with both feet and buying a $2,000 drone right off of the start. A great example of commercialized drones would be photographers, film industries, and other things along those lines. We're able to capture some of the shots that you would just be amazed by, angles in which that we would never be able to capture before. As opposed to being stuck on the ground, we are now able to change the angle, the height, and all of our versatility is greatly increased and enhanced by the use of drones. We can take these things, put cameras on them, and have it so that we use what's called a gimbal. A gimbal is essentially operates the same way as your head and your eyes do. So while my head is moving left and right, my eyes remain stable. This is how we are able to get some of the great footage that you see today through drones. Another example of commercialized drones is using them for what we call precision agriculture. Now, precision agriculture is going to change the farming industry completely. What we do is we take a drone and we'll go in and we'll measure the crop. So as opposed to an entire crop duster having to sweep and dust the entire field, we're now able to take a single drone, go in and dust that one plant. It's not only beneficial for the farmer who is spending $3,000 to $7,000 a gallon on agricultural pesticides, but it's also beneficial to the consumer we are now consuming less pesticide. Let's talk about hobby drones. Hobby drones are completely different as opposed to commercial or militarized drones. Hobby drones would be an example of the DJI Phantom or the Blade 350, something that you could pick up from any of your local hobby shops. Now, hobby drones are starting to take a turn as opposed to being just the drones that you can pick up at the store. We're starting to get into the building our own personal little racers. Now, little racers is something that's going to take off in a completely different field as opposed to something that you can just buy out of the store. These mini racers are something that are completely customized for the end user. So if you want something fast and punchy, you can build it that way. If you want something slow and smooth, you can build it that way. Mini racers and all hobby drones are a great way to get involved into the drone industry, and something that I would highly recommend starting small as opposed to jumping in with both feet again, spending $2,000 on a drone that you've never flown before. Start small, start easy, and then go from there. Let's talk a little bit about flight safety and responsibility. Flight safety should be everybody's #1 priority if you're a pilot. There are too many things to take into consideration. You have your flying location, you have the pedestrians and people around you, you have the property around you, in which you are responsible for all of the above. If you crash into somebody's property, you are 100% responsible for that. If you crash into somebody, you are responsible for that. And trust me, there is no worse feeling than crashing into somebody's property and having to pay for that. Not only is it hurtful to your pocket, but it's hurtful to yourself as well. Something that you will never get over and something that you will never ever forget and look back on. So I always recommend to keep flight safety as your #1 responsibility and priority. As also opposed to flight safety, you also need to be very considerate to the people and places around you. You want to be respectful. You don't want to upset anybody or make somebody mad because you're flying over their property, flying over their kids, or anything along those lines. Put yourself in their shoes. Would you want somebody doing the things that you are doing to these people? So, I highly recommend at all times, #1, be safe. Flight safety, #1 importance. #2, always, always, always be respectful to the people that you fly around and the properties that you fly around. These are the things that are bringing the negative attention to the drone industry, which is what we all want to avoid. We want to fly for fun. We want to enjoy ourselves. We're not here to upset people. So make sure that you do your part, fly safe, fly responsible. This is a gimbal. A gimbal is the flight stabilization platform for our cameras. These are how we get those perfectly stable shots that you see. Now what a gimbal does is a gimbal acts the same way as your head and your eyes act together. So while your head's moving left and right, up and down, forward and back, your eyes retain a stable image. It's the same thing that we have going on here. So while the quadcopter is moving up and down, being bumped around by the air, the gimbal is able to keep the quadcopter in a stable, level platform and able to record that perfectly stable flight that you see. So while we're bumping around like this, we've got a great image for you to enjoy. Test and confirm your battery supply at all times. Test prior to going to the field, test when you get to the field, and test after you get to the field. That way you know how much flight time you have, you know your batteries like the back of your hand. Personally, I always like to triple check my batteries. Let's discuss flight modes a little bit. Flight modes are the different types of flight patterns that you have within your remote and the flight controller in which you're using on your drones. Some flight modes are the GPS flight mode. The GPS flight mode is a stability flight mode. So when you're flying and you let go of your controller sticks, your drone comes to a stop and auto hovers and holds position. Now, if you touch the sticks, it will release the GPS lock. But prior to touching the sticks, the drone is always in a GPS fixed state. So it will not move whether the wind blows it or any other outside forces are on the drone. It stays steady at all times. Attitude. Attitude is a different type of GPS lock. It still has the GPS lock, but it allows it to drift. So when you let go of the controller, the drone won't stop. It'll slowly drift at whatever outside force is pushing it. So if we've got a 5-mile-an-hour wind, the drone will drift 5 miles an hour in whichever direction that the drift is going. The third mode that we're going to talk about is manual flight mode. Manual flight mode releases all of the flight controller's functions. There is no GPS lock, there is no GPS hold. You still have a slight bit of stability there, but you do not have the locking in capabilities that the GPS offers. The manual flight mode is the flight mode in which most pilots should start off on. Why? Because it teaches you how to fly properly. If you increase your throttle, your drone will accelerate and increase. If you decrease, it will decrease. Flight modes are absolutely important, being GPS mode, attitude mode, and manual mode. Again, manual mode is the mode in which I recommend all beginner pilots to start off on, because this way you learn your controls as they are meant to be learned and not limited by their functions. The last mode that we're going to discuss is the return to home feature. Return to home feature is a feature that not all drones are capable of having, but most of the drones that you buy from the hobby stores, the DJI Phantom, the Blade series, they will have the return to home function. Return to home function is not only a blessing, but it's also a curse. What do I mean by it's a curse? It's a curse because a lot of times pilots won't give their GPS time to hook up with the other satellites. it has to be hooked up with the other satellites in order to perform the return to home function. What is a return to home function? A return to home function is when you're flying and you lose signal of your drone. You flip that return to home switch and it comes back and it flies and lands right at your feet or the spot in which you took off from. Now, this could also be a curse because it's also known as the flyaway zone. The flyaway zone is when you don't give your drone time to lock into those GPS signals and you hit that return to home button and it doesn't know where home is at. It only remembers one of the last known GPS signals that was indicated in. So you hit the return to home button and instead of coming back and flying to where you are now, it goes back and flies to where you were at before, or maybe to China, or maybe in the woods somewhere where there's a large pile of DJI Phantoms in their flyaway zones. So always remember to give your GPS time to lock in, get the green signal on your lights, then you know that you are good to go on your return to home function. Flight conditions are extremely important to any pilot, whether we're a drone pilot or a fixed wing pilot. You have to make sure that your flight conditions are proper in order to fly. What I do personally is I check the weather channels, multiple weather channels, to ensure that not only is it currently clean outside, but within the next hour or two that we're not going to have a large gust of wind that's going to come in and infect our flight. Because the last thing that we want to do is prepare, get out to the field, as soon as we get there, have to turn around and come home because it's far too windy, there's overcast, or there's other things that are going to affect our flight. Choosing your flight location is exceptionally important. You need to make sure that you choose a very wide and open location, not only if you're flying fixed wing, but also quadcopters as well. The last thing that you want to have to do is watch out for obstacles or other things to avoid. Therefore, choosing your flight location is absolutely important, almost as important as your flight safety.